Hey everybody, thanks for joining for another Unity tutorial. In this video I'm going to be going over noise because in the last video we created this terrain generation and at the moment it's just a bunch of blocks formed into a grid, and you can then change the width and the height, and you can also change the color of all the blocks. And in this video I'm then going to go over actually how to change the Y position so then you can get some cool looking terrain. So to start with, I'm going to go to the project and I'm going to create a new script. I'm going to call this noise. And similar to the map generator script, I'm going to make this a static script. So to make it static, I'm going to remove the start and update methods. I'm going to remove the mono behavior. And then I also want to add the static keyword here. Then, in the code, I want to create a method. I'm going to make it a public static. I'm going to make it return a float. And I'm going to call this generate noise samples. For the parameters, I'm going to give it an int for the x, and then I'm going to then feed in some noise parameters. So for the first parameter, I'm going to give it a int for the seed, a float for the scale, a float for the persistence, a float for the lacunarity, a int for the octaves, a float for the offset, and then finally a actually no, that's what I'm going to do outside of it. So yeah, that's all I want for the generating of the noise samples. I then want to first I'm going to declare some variables up at the top here. So I'm going to create a float called the amplitude. I'm going to set this equal to a default value of something like 1. I'm going to create a float for the frequency. I'm going to set also equal to 1. And then I'm going to create another one being the noise height. Then I'm set equal to 0. Now first I'm going to use the seed to create the different octave offsets for the seed value. Actually, no, I'm going to do that after. So first I'm just going to loop through the octaves and then set the noise value. So I'm going to do a for int I is equal to 0, I is less than the octaves, I plus plus. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a float for the sample x, and I'm going to set this equal to the x divided by the scale multiplied by the frequency. I'm then going to copy and paste that down here, but make this the sample y. And then I'll change those later, but for now I'll just leave those like that. And then next I'm going to create a float for the Perlin value. Then I'm going to set equal to math.Perlin noise. And then for the x I'm going to do sample x. And for the y I want to do sample y. Next I want to then set the noise height to then plus equal the Perlin value multiplied by the amplitude. Finally, I then want the amplitude to then multiply equally persistence, and then I want the frequency to then multiply equally lacunarity. Next, I want to basically use the seed, so then and the offset as well, so you can get like different types of noise, so it's not just the exact same one each time. And to do that, I'm gonna create a system.random. I'm going to call this PRNG, which stands for pseudo random number generator. I'm going to set that equal to a new system.random with a parameter of seed. I then want to also create a vector2 array called octave offsets. And I want to set that equal to a new vector2 array with a length of octaves. I then want to then loop through the octaves like I did before. So for int I is equal to 0, I is less than the octaves, and then I plus plus. And then what I want to do is I want to create a float for the offset x, and I'm going to set that equal to prng.next, being negative 100,000 and positive 100,000. I then want to then take this entire thing and then add that offset variable that we created at the top here. I then want to copy and paste that and then just have this one be called offset y. I then want to set octave offsets with an index of I equal to a new vector 2 being the offset x by offset y. Now, next, all I want to do is then in the sample x and sample y for the noise down here, I want to then take the x and then wrap it in parentheses. And same thing for the one down here. And then after the x, I then want to then add the octave offsets with an index of I dot x. And then this one down here, I want to then add octave offsets with an index of I dot y. So now I have those different values, and then for the last thing I need to do is at the bottom here, I then need to return a float, and the float that we modified for the noise is the noise height, so all I want to do is return that noise height. Next, what I want to do is I want to then go to the map generator, and then basically what I want to do is take this y height for the position of all the blocks, and then just add that noise height. So what I want to do is I want to create a float called the noise height, and set that equal to noise.generate noise samples. And now this is where I then need to feed in a bunch of parameters that I need to create. And those I'm going to create up here. So I'm going to create an int for the seed, a float for the scale, a float for the persistence, a float for the lacunarity, a int for the octaves, a float for the offset, and then one final thing I'm also going to create is a float for the noise height multiplier. After that, I want to go down here, and then for the noise samples, I want to do x, the seed, the scale, the persistence, the lacunarity, the octaves, and the offset. Now that we generated our noise samples down here with the y height position of all the vertices, well, not vertices, but blocks, I then want to then add that noise height. And then I then want to then multiply that by the noise height multiplier. Now that I've done that, now that's over. Now I want to go to the noise, or not the noise script, the terrain generator script. And then I then want to then create those parameters up here. So you can actually see them in the inspector. So I want to create a public int for the seed, a float for the scale, a public float for the persistence, and then also a public float for the lacunarity. I also then want to create a int for the octaves, which is basically just the how many layers of noise you have. And then I also want to then create a public float for the offset. And then I also then want to create a public float for the noise height multiplier. After that, I just have to feed those parameters into this method down here. So right here, I have to do the seed, the scale, persistence, lacunarity, octaves, offset, and the noise height multiplier. So now that I've done that, I know that's a lot, but now that that's done, if I go to the terrain generator over here, I need to then set those variables. So I can just set the seed, just keep that at 0. I'm going to set the scale equal to, I'm just going to set the scale to 100. The persistence is typically set to 0.5 no matter what, and then the lacunarity would typically be set to 2. And then the octaves are around 8. And then the offset I can just keep at 0 for now, and then the noise height multiplier I can set to 45. Around that. So now if I go to the game and then press play, when it then generates the noise, as you can see, it's a nice generated terrain. If I go out and then maybe modify the offset, you can see that the offset does work, because if I set to something like 3 and then press play, it might be hard to notice because it has to go out each time, but it does slightly offset it a little bit. And then for the seed, if I then click like 2 or hit type in 2, it will then generate like a completely different map of terrain. So that's basically it for the noise. There is one more thing I want to do in this video, and that's basically the issue of you do have to click play every time you want to generate a noise, and it would be nice to have buttons at the bottom here, which would be using the inspector editor. So yeah, and you know what, to actually do that, I'm actually just going to do that in the next video, because that is a little bit of a longer thing. But yeah, and that's what I'm going to be doing in the next video. I'm going to create a bunch of buttons. It's so you can generate the noise, delete noise, regenerate it, and do that sort of thing so you can mess with it in the editor. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video, and join me for the next one.